We're recording. Here we go.
Risk. The final frontier. These are the stories of the Axon enterprise. Our mission to protect life, to seek amazing people, and live epic tales. Come, let us boldly go.
All right, welcome to Boldly Go. What do you think, Mike?
That was pretty cool. And let me go ahead and ask, did you make that yourself?
I did. I'm like a James Cameron now. Me and a little AI make our own Boldly Go opening sequence. Did you recognize the script? I ripped off the script from a famous series.
I did not, but I'm sure you're going to tell me.
Yeah, it was the original opening sequence from Star Trek in 1960s.
I'm a bigger Star Wars fan, so I might have caught the reference there.
Yeah, it was space, the final frontier. But for me, it was risk, which is what this show's all about. It's about taking risk and going boldly.
So we're going to do this.
We are going to do this. We are going to boldly go.
And we're boldly going here. Where are we?
So we are in a very special place. In fact, well, hold on. Let me tell you a little more about where we are, Mike.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my underground lair.
So I took a little inspiration. So look, you got to have a little bit of a sense of humor. We do pretty serious work around here. And back around 2005 or 6, I was on the front page of every newspaper in America saying that we were evil, we were killing people, that, we had lied about the safety of our products. And it was right at that time I was building this house. And for the man cave, I decided, well, if everybody's going to say I'm running an evil empire, well, then clearly I need a volcano lair. So I took some inspiration from the great Dr. Evil. And if you remember, he had a volcano lair too. It was pretty cool, actually. And a rocket ship. He's got all the cool tools.
Do we have a rocket ship? That is
no, we don't have a clone either. But we do have a volcano lair, Mike.
So we'll be recording our podcast here in the volcano lair.
That's right.
You mentioned in the beginning, boldly go. Like, why the name?
So one thing I've learned about sort of leadership and managing a big company is values matter a ton. In fact, the actual values a company embodies eats procedure and process for lunch. Right? The decisions people make every day based on cultural norms and expectations. And one thing I'm really proud of, I actually think our team, led by Luke Larson and Josh Isner, probably 12, 13 years ago, did a real effort to build our values in a way that people would actually use to make decisions. And so we came up with very action-oriented, simple phrases like win right? Which means, hey, we're competitive. We want to win, but we have zero tolerance for people that are going to, play any games. We're not going to tolerate any ethical lapses. And so similarly, aim far, right? Tells our people, hey, we're not worried about next quarter. We want to be thinking about next year and the year after that. And Boldly Go is a new initiative that I've initiated for us to be able to encourage risk-taking, because I think risk-taking is so important in life and at work. Now, I'm not talking about reckless risk-taking. I'm talking about the kind of risks that, make bold things happen.
Now, today we're going to interview you. You're a co-host of the podcast, but we're going to, in a second, talk about what we're going to do during this first podcast. Who do you envision, though, to go with us on this journey to talk about these boldly go ideas?
So we're going to take, this is the first of many. In fact, we're doing another experiment. So we are writing a book together, me and you. In fact, if I go back, my first book is here, The End of Killing, which is our manifesto that I wrote back in like 2018-ish. And that was kind of a miserable process, writing a book. It was like just, the longer a manuscript gets, the harder it is. And so what I realized this time is, hey, what if we could record the stories of the history of what it's taken to go from a garage to a NASDAQ 100 company? And what if we could tell those stories in ways that are fun and engaging, exciting? But we're going to take every episode, we're going to feed it into which program, Mike?
Boldly Go. Oh,
ChatGPT. That was a test. I got you.
Mark, you could shout the answers out at any time.
Yeah, we're gonna write a book, a business biography, based on every chapter we filmed together here.
All right, I flubbed the Star Wars, Star Trek answer, and I flubbed that one. I'm a little nervous. I will tell you that. As much as we're around each other and we do things in front of our customers, like I am a little nervous on this first podcast.
Yeah, and in fairness to Mike, look, I was sneaking up on him. I didn't let him see any of the content that I had queued up, and I've got some more treasures in here. From a little bit of our history. Figure, it'd be more fun to get the authentic reactions.
And speaking of authenticity, you're at the controls.
Yeah, this is pretty fun. So we've got this set up over here. I'm able to, change the camera angles as we're going. So we can have, this is a fully automated studio. I mean, Mark's here to help today. We've got our safety officer, but I can put Mike over there, put you on Spotlight. We can come up together. Yeah, this is so fun.
Right. Let's see if we can pull this first episode off then.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
So you want to talk about the TASER story, the history of TASER. We're going to write this book together. So where does it begin?
Yeah, so it begins, well, I'm going to talk about where it began for me.
Okay.
So in 1993, I was in Belgium. I was going to graduate school. And I was out at dinner one night, and we were all talking about our hometowns. And I was bragging about Scottsdale, Arizona. And some of these European students said, we would never go to America because there's too much gun violence. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to explain to them, well, look, don't believe what you see on TV. America's great. Scottsdale's great. And one of them asked me, do you know anybody who's been shot and killed? And by the time I added it up, I knew like 4 or 5 people. And I live in Scottsdale, this quaint little golf community. And so I realized, you know what? Maybe the problem is bigger than I'd previously thought. Mm-hmm. And then around the same time, 2 other things happened. One, I was reading a newspaper article in the Wall Street Journal, and they had just come out with the gun death statistics for 1991. Guess how many people were shot and killed in the U.S. in 1991? I'll put you on the spot again.
30,000.
You're low. It was 37,376. And I remember that number because, there's just some moments in life that things just stick in your brain. And then the third thing, and by the way, when that happened, I remember thinking that has to be a typo. There's no way that many people would die. Our brain, we try to compare it to other things. And I remember comparing it to the Vietnam War. What I remembered from high school, right? America's most painful war. We lost 68,000 souls in Vietnam, but it took us 10 years of jungle warfare to do that. So the American gun violence rate is at 5 times that intensity. We're losing more people every 2 years than we did in the United States than we did in 10 years in Vietnam.
And you remember that number to this day.
I do. And guess how many of those gun deaths were classified as justifiable self-defense?
Probably, is this another trick question?
It is. Well, no.
I mean, you're going to make me look really dumb on this first podcast episode
I'm just trying to make me look smart, Mike.
That I can't answer any questions, but I'm going to guess less than 500.
Yeah, it was 1%, 376 were justifiable self-defense. The rest were homicides. Suicides were number 1 at 50%. Homicides at 40%. Accidents at 7%. Unclassified at 2 or 3%. And so I started thinking about gun violence, but from a different perspective. I mean, to be honest, I've got a replica of Captain Kirk's phaser here.
Because of course you do.
All right, maybe this was planned in advance. I would have my prop, but right, if we had Captain Kirk's phaser, we wouldn't be shooting and killing people anymore. So why don't we? Is the question that struck me. And then the last piece that came together was my mom. I'm in Belgium. She's back in Scottsdale, and we had a conversation. And she said, "Hey, Rick, I'm going to get a gun." And I'm like, "Well, why are you going to get a gun?" There was a particularly gruesome crime in our neighborhood. And my dad had started commuting back to San Francisco. And so Mom said she was going to buy a gun. And I said, well, Mom, why don't you get something else? I'm not sure a gun is for you. Maybe you should get a taser or something. And so she went to the gun store and she asked if she could buy a taser. And they said, no, ma'am, it's illegal. But, to me, this is crazy. They're would you like an AK-47, ma'am? Maybe a shotgun, or we've got the Dirty Harry 44 Magnum, but she couldn't buy a taser.
Is this pre-Rodney King when taser was all over the news? Or post?
This was
Rodney King?
right after Rodney King. In fact, back then, if you would have said TASER, most people's reaction would either have been, well, hey, I saw it in Rodney King and it didn't work very well. And we'll come back to that probably in a future episode because there's a lot behind that story. Or the other place people saw TASER was in pop culture. In fact, I'm going to share, I went back and I tried to think, where did that idea come from for me?
And this is it.
I'm going to show you the backstory of where I think I first learned about TASER.
50,000 volts, motherfucker. Have a nice day.
Yeah, so TASER was much bigger in popular. And by the way, what a badass. I just remember John.
Well, I actually think we should name our podcast 50,000 volts. Mother.
You can swear there's a podcast. Yeah, what a badass Jean-Claude Van Damme was. Anyway, I think that's where I first saw the TASER.
It's a bit distracting. He's doing that split.
Well, that's impressive.
It is.
It is a little distracting. Maybe we should put Jean-Claude Van Damme to the side for a moment. All right.
So that is in your mind where the idea, like you saw this.
Yeah. And so that all sort of came together and it just struck me. All right, mom can't buy a TASER. She can buy a gun. What's going on? And then, it's in popular film, but it never gone anywhere. Mm-hmm. And so I started researching TASER to see what happened. Like why, this big question, why can my mom go to a gun store and she can't buy a TASER? And it actually turns out it's because the original TASER was designed to look like a flashlight. In fact, let me bring that up. So this is a picture of Jack Cover, the original TASER inventor. And the original TASER looked kind of like a dustbuster. It was in the shape of a flashlight. And it used gunpowder to launch those two darts out. And under US federal law, if you use gunpowder to launch the darts, it makes it a firearm. But you cannot sell a gun that's disguised as a flashlight. So that thing is in the same category as a sawed-off shotgun, which is fundamentally illegal. Yes, you can get it with special permits, but it's really, really hard. And so that's why the TASER was originally, quote unquote, banned, because it was designed into this regulatory dead end.
Now, because I've heard you say this before, what was your idea in school? I mean, you were in graduate school at the time, right? What were you thinking you were going to build?
Yeah. So the first thing I did is I looked at this and I thought what everybody else does at first, which is, oh man, if it was only wireless. Mm-hmm. And so I guess to work on that problem, I had to go figure out, okay, what would it take to make this thing wireless? And I had no idea how these things worked. So I had my mom FedEx me my high school physics textbook. And I just started reading through it. And I started bugging everybody who I knew who was an electrical engineer. And then I came back and I had to finish up at University of Chicago. And that's where I took a class on entrepreneurship. And there I wrote a business plan on what would become TASER International. And it was to build a shotgun round TASER. And what was really interesting was I was able to figure out how these things work by just doing some basic library research and then my high school physics textbook. But I could only get so far. I could ask some good questions. And then I got to a point where it's like, well, I have some assumptions about what it takes for electricity to paralyze you, but I couldn't find any answers anywhere in the medical literature. And I remember talking to my dad, who has always been a mentor to me. And he said, hey, why don't you call that TASER guy? And he was a NASA scientist. Like this guy, Jack was one of the chief scientists on the Apollo moon landing project.
Incredible.
And my dad says, look, this guy's clearly brilliant. He's been doing this already back then in 93. He'd been at it for 25 years. And I said, Dad, he might steal my idea. And my dad's like, you arrogant boy. Like, this guy's smarter than you. He's been doing it for 25 years. Like, he's forgotten more than you'll know. Go talk to him. You have nothing to lose. And so I picked up the phone and I dialed 411, which, for some of our viewers out there, some of the younger viewers, I'm talking to you. This is before Google. That's how you got people's phone numbers, is you would pick up the phone and dial 411, and then you'd ask directory assistants, does it even work anymore?
No, I don't think that even works anymore.
I'm going to try 411 later. Anyway, so
Mark, why don't you try 411, Mark, and let us know if that works.
oh yeah, well, good plan. We'll put Mark to work. So I dialed 411, asked for Jack Cover in Tucson, Arizona, and next thing I know, his phone's ringing, and he picks up, and we had a conversation. I said, look, hey, I'm 23 years old. I'm a grad student. I'm working on this project, and it looks like you live in Tucson. He said, yeah, come on down. You're only like an hour and a half away.
So he was welcoming. He wanted you to come down.
Oh yeah, it was wild. So by then I had graduated.
Mm-hmm. And how old are you at this time?
I'm 23.
23.
And probably the most important decision I had made in my life up to that point, and one of the most important decisions ever, was I decided I was not going to interview for a job because I had this crazy idea, and everybody was telling me it was crazy. My friends were making fun of me, like, Rick's going to make the shocky gun. My parents thought I, was maybe not thinking clearly. And I realized if I interviewed for a job, I might have to explain to my parents why I would say no to a good job offer to go do this thing. And so instead I just said, you know what, I'm going to move home and I am going to give this a try. And I'm just going to try to figure it out. I'm going to dig around and see if there's something there. And if it fails, it'll be a good story.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, so you decided I'm not even going to try to get a job.
That was,
you're going to start a company, but you're like, I'm not even, all your friends are out interviewing, I'm sure, trying to get jobs at big corporations to make a lot of money coming out of grad school. And I'm not doing that.
Yeah. And actually, this is one of the things I would share with you in the boldly go mentality. A decision rule that has served me well is what decision is going to make for a better story. Because I think as we sit here today, I've done really well. I've got a volcano lair. I drive
Not many
nice
people
car.
have a volcano lair, that's for sure.
But none of this really matters. All we really have in life is the moment we have right now and the story we've lived and the people and relationships. I know it sounds a little hippy dippy for a tech guy, but I think that's all that matters. And so as I looked at this at the time, I said, if I go take a job, like what, I'm going to be like everybody else. Sure, I might make some money and do whatever, but man, imagine if I can bring Captain Kirk's taser to life. Or if I fail, I want to fail spectacularly. And then I might take some time and go be a ski lift operator and then, go interview for a job in the next cycle.
Mark, do you have an answer? Did you look it up?
411 is dead? Oh
Now,
my God.
Before we get back to the, Mark says it is dead. Before we get back to the shocky gun, do you still have your high school physics book?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know.
And what struck me is when you're telling that story, because again, I'm around you a lot and all we talk about is AI. What if we had ChatGPT back then? Like, what if you were starting the company today?
Whoa, dude, like I had to do the internet didn't exist yet. I had to tell my kids when I moved back to Arizona, one of the first things I did is I would take my mom with me because she was like, hey, Ricky, how can I help? I'd be, hey, Mom, come to the ASU Law Library with me. And we're going to go read through patents today. And you would go through a patent index and you would look up a patent and then they'd give it to you on the microfiche. Remember the little film reader?
Oh, yeah.
Almost like a James Bond episode. You'd put it in the machine and you'd look at the microfiche. That's how I was reading patents. That's how I discovered that Jack Cover lived in Tucson. He had a patent on a new compressed air version of the TASER. And that's when I knew, this guy is trying to build a new TASER that'll be legal for people like my mom.
So you go down to visit Jack in Tucson. What happens?
So, boy, it was like showing up at the Smithsonian. Like this guy. So first of all, this elderly gentleman, it's like come to visit your
Like,
grandparents.
what's his age approximately?
He was 73
Okay.
at the time, and he opens the
And
door.
you're 23.
Yeah, I'm 23. He's 73. We were the odd couple. So he invites me into his house, and he's got, I'll bring some onto the show later. Some of the early prototypes. He had done a cigarette pack taser. He had done a buffalo gun, and he showed me a video of him dropping buffalo with this high-power buffalo gun. And that's when I was like, oh man, this stuff is no joke. Like this electricity, this could be a magical solution to how to stop somebody. my undergraduate degree was in neurobiology. So I actually found my college entrance application. My parents kept a copy of it. And I wrote about that I wanted to build robotic limbs. Like I was inspired by Luke Skywalker's robotic arm. I thought that was like the coolest thing ever, right? This idea that you could have a machine that could interface to your brain. Now, ultimately, I ended up going a different direction in life. Instead of building a machine that my brain could control, I built a machine that can override my brain's control of my body so that we would not have to kill people anymore. That's the vision.
Yeah. Yeah. You failed I asked that question earlier because I've heard you say it before. You wanted to build Luke Skywalker's robotic arm.
Yep.
Which is pretty cool. So you go down to meet with Jack. You go knock on his door. Do you just show up in his one day and just knock on his door when he says, come on down?
Yeah, he invited me down. And so I showed up on his front doorstep and he invites me inside. And then he's got the buffalo gun. He's got all this other stuff.
He still had the buffalo gun at that time.
He still had the
We
buffalo
have,
gun.
I've seen the video. I know you don't have it on you, but one episode we should show the video. It's like historical footage. It's like grainy. It's like the grassy knoll video, the JFK shooting. It's this grainy video of taking down a buffalo.
That was a magical moment in TASER history. And in fact, I'm trying to find the buffalo gun. I think it may have gotten lost, or it might be at the Smithsonian because we sent a bunch of old TASER gear to the Smithsonian in DC. So it may be in their display. As you know from knowing me, I'm terrible at keeping track of details, and so I think the actual buffalo gun may have been lost.
You're good. You're good at certain things. You're good at running the board over there. You love technology, so
yeah,
right,
I'm having a ball doing this. This is fun.
all right. So you're with Jack. You're seeing all this crazy stuff. Like, where does it go from there?
Yeah, well, this is interesting. So Jack then tells me where he got the idea from. And I know you know the answer.
This I do know the answer.
All right. So where did the name TASER come from?
It's from I don't know the exact year, but early 1900s, maybe in the 1920s, what they call them, dime store novels. Is that what they call
Yep.
it? And and it's an acronym for Thomas A. Smith's electric rifle.
Yep. Tom Swift. So
Tom
actually,
Swift.
I put the book up here on screen.
That would be your brother, who was Thomas.
Tom Smith. That's right. He'd love to take the credit. And Tom did co-found the company with me. But no, so Tom Swift and his electric rifle, this was science fiction for the early 1900s. In fact, Ray Kurzweil, who is one of my other heroes, author of The Singularity is Near, and a thinker who's been massively influential in my life, but we'll come back to him in a future episode. The guy who coined the term, the law of accelerating returns. Ray Kurzweil was also a fan of the Tom Swift series when he was growing up.
Wow.
So actually, this is a great example of that. I'm not completely batshit crazy. That the idea that art inspires life, right? I mean, rocket ships appeared in the movies and in books before they ever appeared in the real world, right? Spock had the communicator way before the cell phone. And Jack saw the idea for the electric weapon in this science fiction novel.
At this podcast, put the book back up there again.
Yeah, all right, there we go. Oh, whoa, here we go.
If this podcast does not take off with you and I co-hosting it, maybe we could start producing. That is pretty cool that you're able to. I'm trying to get my finger there. That you're able to pop that up. We might have a future in producing podcasts if the whole hosting thing doesn't work out.
This is fun. And look, this is first shot, guys. Without a net, first time we've tried this, and it is so empowering, by the way, that the tools exist for two guys to sit in their humble volcano lair and put on a podcast. It's pretty wild.
You can't see the entire volcano lair, but to paint a picture, it's not huge. I mean, we are confined with what we can do in this volcano lair, which is super cool, but it's not, we're doing it live with limited space.
Yeah, I do have to say, I built this 15 years ago, and it's the most underused part of the house. And so I'm so excited the volcano lair has found its purpose.
Now, I don't think you're batshit crazy. I mean, I've heard lots of your batshit crazy ideas, and I usually think there's something there. Now, you have failed several times. I'm sure that's going to come up later. But did you think Jack was batshit crazy when you started talking to him?
Jack was, look, he was the quintessential inventor. I would say Jack, this guy at one point, he was the chief scientist on the Apollo moon landing project. Let me bring up this picture of me and Jack together. Like this guy was brilliant. And when we started out, so, you know, for anybody who's starting a business, it's actually really simple. You don't overthink it. It's like, you just say, I'm going to do this. And every morning you get out of bed and you say, what is the next problem I got to solve? What's the alligator that's closest to the boat? I'm going to work on that. And so when Jack and I got started, he convinced me. By the way, I asked him, I went down, I met with him, and I said, hey, Jack, all this tech stuff is really cool, but I've got this idea for a wireless shotgun taser. And then I explained my theory. It actually had some math that said it could work. And by the way, spoiler alert, it did work. We made a shotgun taser, but not for another 12 years. But then it failed as a product. Wild. I think the biggest technical breakthrough ever made failed as a product. But if I go back to my meeting with Jack, and I explained the theory to him, and he said, well, Rick, I don't know if it'll work. Like, you're going to have to do a lot of experiments. But I do know this. If you build the original taser with a compressed air launching system instead of the gunpowder, it will be legal. And that we could go sell. And our target was not to sell to police, because police can buy sawed-off shotguns. They could buy the old taser, but the public couldn't. And so that was my mission, was like, hey, I want to make these available. And by the way, police shoot and kill about 1,000 people a year. The public, the general public, shoot now over 40,000 today. So it's a much bigger problem. And so our belief was, let's build a compressed air taser for the public. Okay, so then the question is, well, where do you start? What do you do? And, well, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, Jack had sent them a letter with his design, and they said, we don't approve anything based on a design. You have to build a prototype. We have to physically see it. Okay, so we have our mission. And so, and by the way, this was moving so fast. I started the company on September 7th, 1993. Jack and I met him about a week later with the phone call. And then it took me a month to convince him to work with me, because who's this kid, this 23-year-old kid?
Straight out of college.
Yep. And
not even going to apply for a job.
Yeah, unemployable. And so Jack, it took me a month. I would wear him down. I'd call him every couple of days. And here's the problem. Like, Jack was trying to go out and raise money. And he pitched me on our first meeting. He said, hey, Rick, I'm out to raise $2 million. And here's what will happen. I'll take $1 million and basically disappear to Tahiti. And then the other $1 million can stay in the company. And I said, that's great. A great plan, Jack, but I don't have $2 million. So what else can we do? And then he'd sort of grumble and, well, then I'm not interested. So I said, look, I could raise $100,000 from friends and family, and you could own a big chunk of the company. What's interesting, he did not want to own equity in the company. I think Jack, he'd started the taser companies twice, once in the 70s. He tried again in the 80s, and he'd had some bad luck. Every time it ended up in litigation, and you know, he was more of an engineer than a people guy in some ways, or a business person. And he was like, you know what? I just want a reliable patent royalty and some reliable income. The stock things never worked out well. So it took me a month of, you know, I'd call him back every couple of days. Hey, Jack, how's it going raising the money? Look, I knew he wasn't going to raise any money. I loved him already, but the guy was 73. This had failed twice. And his pitch was like, hey, I'm going to take half the money and disappear. Like, investors aren't going to invest in that. So eventually I wore him down, and he finally said, okay, let's give this a try.
And just to be clear, so all his prior taser devices, they were using gunpowder. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so now your challenge was to build one with compressed air.
Yeah.
So the ATF will allow you to sell it.
Yeah, and we started at his house on October 15th, and we started building prototypes with parts from Ace Hardware. Like, this guy could build a nuclear bomb with parts from Ace Hardware. It was crazy. The level of just ingenuity. In fact, the first compressed air system we built used bicycle tire valves. It was wild to be able to fill the compressed gas cylinder. So I'm kind of bogging down, but the point I want to make is, in 30 days, we went from a cold start to a functioning prototype, because we mailed it to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms on November 15th, and we got their approval by November 30th.
Incredible.
It was incredible speed.
I'm not sure you can get that approval today in that short order.
No, because we do it all the time. We interact with the government. Now it's 6 months to 18 months. But you know why it went so fast? The guy who signed our letter was named Ed Owens, Chief of Firearm Technology at the Bureau of ATF. He was the same guy who in 1976 had signed the order declaring the original taser illegal. And I got a chance to meet him, and he said it was something he felt terrible. It was like one of the biggest travesties of his career.
Wow.
But he didn't, as he explained to me, he said, Rick, I don't get to make the laws. I got to interpret the laws.
Yeah.
And under the way the laws are written, that thing was a firearm. And because it didn't look like a pistol, that made it a short-barreled rifle, like a sawed-off shotgun.
Incredible.
So yeah, we're going to come back in a future episode and go really deep in that first year or two. But the main takeaway is you just get started. Well, look, like you've done it with your site, your project on your newsletter. Like, just talk about that a little bit and how successful that's been.
Yeah, I have a weekly newsletter that goes out. It's on Substack now to over 1,000 law enforcement leaders and others, technologists and academics. And it just started from a handful of leaders that I would send an email to, and they found it valuable and just sort of organically grew from there. And now it has become a thing. That's pretty cool to see it grow. And all I did was, to your point, just get started. And I remember talking to, I had done one when I was a director at IECP many years ago. And I remember having lunch with Colonel Steve McGraw, who was the head of the Texas Department of Public Safety at IECP conference. And he goes, you should really restart that newsletter. And I said, well, I don't really have the back at IECP, I could get the email addresses and, I could promote it from within IECP. And he says something very similar. He goes, well, just get started, just do it and I'll help you. And that's how it started.
Yeah.
Before we move on though, cause I am like when you're talking to Jack, cause I know you're a big sci-fi guy, you're big into space and everything. Did you talk about the Apollo mission and the work that he did on the Apollo mission? Like as you're working in the garage on these prototypes?
Yeah, we did. He actually didn't stay around for long. He was there in the early 60s. And he said it was a super exciting time, but he left to go start TASER because President Johnson, following the assassination of John Kennedy and rising violence and the war protests, and the National Guard opening fire on American protesters at one point, the President of the United States had put out a call for non-lethal weapons, and Jack read that call and then said, I'm going.
Yeah. And maybe we should put in the show notes that the Presidential Commission report that led to non-lethal is really the foundation for a lot of what we think about with policing and criminal justice today. It was a historical report that you can trace a lot of what is, how police departments do business based on that in 1967. I don't know, Mark, you could check that.
Yeah, well, I think just like, President Obama's Council on 21st Century Policing following the shootings in Ferguson, Missouri, they're similar. Sometimes these tumultuous events lead to, lasting and significant change.
So what was the name of the company when you finally started the company?
So when we first started it, I called it ICER, Incapacitating Electronic Restraints. I was trying so hard to copy TASER. This is before I met Jack.
ICER.
ICER, ICER. I get it. Not my greatest marketing moment.
You're not afraid of failure.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And then I met Jack, and then we converted the name to Air TASER Inc. because we figured there's guns and air guns. There's the firearm TASER and then the air TASER. So we were Air TASER Inc. and then we became TASER International. And then 20 years later, we changed our name to Axon, which we'll come to in a later episode.
So you got approval from the ATF.
Yep. Then we had to figure out how the hell we're going to make these things. And so we moved up to Scottsdale. Now at that time we were down in Tucson. I was living in, my parents had a motorhome they would use to go to dog shows. And so I parked it near Jack's house.
Do you have pictures of that? That would.
Oh my Lord, I do. If I don't have them on this computer, I will save that for the early days.
I'm just picturing in my mind you living in this motorhome outside of this 73-year-old guy's house in Tucson, Arizona, trying to start a company called Air TASER.
Yeah. Well, I was in a trailer park about a mile or two away. And the one thing I remember most about that time is I loved my drives back to my parents' house on the weekends because there was a 90-minute drive where I couldn't work on anything. Other than that, I was so stressed out because I'm like spending money that, my parents and their friends had invested. And I had this insane sense of obligation that I had to be working every free minute, except when I was driving. Now, this is before cell phones and all that. And so that was so nice to just unplug my brain and drive for an hour and a half. So then we moved up to Scottsdale. And, it took us a year to get the product into production. The first product failed. It was a consumer version of TASER. We launched with the sharper image, which was
I remember those days.
the premier consumer electronic catalog in the country, and it just failed. We had this epiphany, this terrifying moment, like, how are we going to keep the business alive? No, it didn't like not sell. It didn't sell zero, but it was barely selling. It was not enough to cover our expenses.
I mean, there's a lesson there. Like your first product was a failure.
Yeah, complete bomb. Then
I wasn't going to call it a bomb, but you called it a bomb.
Yeah, and to layer on top, now we couldn't sell to police in America because Jack, the original inventor, had signed a deal with the guy who, a lawyer, had bought what was left of his previous company, which was called Tasertron. And because the guy's a lawyer, the first thing when we launched he did was sued us. And when I got my first $20,000 legal bill, I realized, whoa, okay, uncle. And what he'd sued us for was claiming he had exclusivity to the police market in America. And we said, look, we're not interested in it anyway, so fine. We'll sign. You can have exclusivity there, even though we had never agreed to that, but that's a long story. We ended up actually in litigation with Jack as well. That's when our relationship kind of came apart. But we said, fine, like, we won't sell to police in America. And he had actually done me a real favor, because that early TASER, our first air TASER, it was underpowered, just like the original TASER. When I had asked Jack why the TASER failed to stop Rodney King, he said it's because the batteries weren't charged. Looking back, I know that's not the case now. A lot of times we don't see the faults in our children, and I think that's what Jack truly believed. But the original TASER, they had never done the biological testing of, like, how much electricity does it take to physically paralyze your muscles. And I can tell you, there was nothing in the scientific literature because nobody had ever done the work. And I learned it the hard way, because in 1996, so in our second year in the market, I got invited by the Czech National Police in Prague to go demo the TASER. Now, because they were not in the United States, I was pretty excited. I was like, hey, finally, some cops we can sell to. And we went, and I would tell you, it was the most embarrassing day of my life.
Before you tell the story, maybe you should tell folks how a TASER works, in case they don't know, because they need to understand this before you tell the story.
Yeah, so the TASER is a neuromuscular incapacitation system. It fires 2 darts, and those darts connect to your body, and we run a current through the body, and that current stimulates the nerves. And the original TASER had enough power to, like, create the pain nerves, stimulate the pain nerves in your skin, right? And so you can make the pain up in the surface of the skin happen. But what we've learned is, if you really want to incapacitate somebody, like, human beings can overcome a lot of pain, especially if they're afraid or they're on drugs or they're angry. We have this whole fight or flight mechanism. You hear about people in battle who have, like, a limb blown off and they continue to fight because that adrenaline surge can block out the pain. You've got to go deeper in the body. You need more power to hit the nerves that control your muscles, because that's the motor nervous system. And that's what we needed to hit to be able to paralyze somebody. And when I went to Prague in 96, I learned our first generation only hit the pain cells. It didn't incapacitate.
And TASER does not shock. You hear that all the time. It's not a stun gun, although there's a drive stun on some earlier version we can talk about later. But there's a misconception, like, no, you're locking up the muscles, as you just described. It's not a pain compliance device.
Correct. And it's not like the 110, shock that comes out of the wall. Far more dangerous. So it's not the volts that get you, it's the amps, if you've ever heard that. It's the amount of current. And you can get many amps out of the wall socket. The TASER emits typically 0.02 amps. It's very low. But if you get the frequency right,
There'll be a test on this later.
It will incapacitate your nervous system. So we're up to 96, and I go and I demo. I hit 7 volunteers.
You're in the Czech Republic now.
And not one of these guys goes down. And I remember walking out of there absolutely humiliated. I felt like the world's biggest snake oil salesman. I called back home to my brother and my dad, who were, my dad had funded this thing. I'm like, Dad, I think we may have to shut it down. Like, it doesn't do what we say it does. And he said, well, relax, don't make any harsh decisions. So I went out and got blinding drunk that night with the other guy and Malcolm Sherman, I head of sales. And then when I got home, I called a guy named Captain Greg Meyer at LAPD, who was one of the world's expert in non-lethal weapons. And he said, of course, Rick, like non-lethal weapons only affect the pain receptors. And it's true. He showed me videos of pepper spray and other things. Nothing. And this is why police didn't trust non-lethal weapons. They said it's great if you're working on somebody who's not motivated, who's not angry, who's not on drugs. But you get somebody who's angry on drugs, like the tough guys, it doesn't stop them. But then I remembered, wait a minute. There was this buffalo back in the day. That buffalo didn't feel pain. I saw it. That buffalo was locked up. So we can do this. And I remember back to my neurobiology training. And so I had a hunch. We got to figure out how to get to the motor nerves. So we went and we...
On the when you're in the Czech Republic and you like, tell me again, why didn't it work the first time before you tell us why you figured this out?
Yeah, the problem was it just stimulated. It didn't.
Was it underpowered?
It was underpowered.
It was underpowered.
Yeah, I mean that's the simplest version.
Yeah.
It didn't have enough power to get deep in. If you think about the nerves that feel pain, they're right here, right in my skin. It's easy. A little bit of electricity will get to it. But when you want to get down to the nerves that control your biceps and your legs and your back muscles, those nerves aren't up on the skin. They're buried deep in the body, and we got to push the energy deep enough to hit those. And then once we do. So we hired a guy named Dr. Robert Strapbucker, probably one of the smartest people I've ever met. Well, take out the probably. One of the smartest people I've ever met. And Strat, brilliant guy. He was the oldest flight surgeon in Gulf War I, nuclear cardiologist, MD, and a PhD. And he helped us design, and we paid him for the grand total of $2,500 and one pig. By sheer luck, he also happened to live on a farm in Nebraska. His family's asparagus farm where they also raised pigs. And so we were able to have him help us design a test where we would take a pig and anesthetize it so it would not feel any pain. And by the way, this guy is an upstanding researcher. We made sure we followed all the safety protocols. So we anesthetized this pig, and then we built a machine where we could change the output levels of the taser. And on that one day of testing for $2,000, $2,500, we were able to optimize what it took to take that anesthetized pig. You could cut it open for surgery, wouldn't flinch. We could control all the muscles. And that was going to be the magic. However, this is 96, early 97. I couldn't sell to police because of this patent restriction until mid 98, which when you're running out of money.
You can sell here in the US. That's why you were trying the Czech Republic.
But hey man, when you're running out of money, a year and a half is forever. So we're like, what do we do for the next year and a half? And this was like December of 97. So we had this harebrained idea. We were like, well, some of our customers have been saying they don't believe they want to use the taser to defend themselves, but they'd love to rig it up to protect their car because, people are stealing car stereos and car theft. And so we rigged up what we called the auto taser. And we just did this in a matter of a week. We built a prototype. We bought an old dashboard, put it on a display stand, and we put the steering wheel lock on it. And we had a taser inside the dashboard. It wasn't even in the steering wheel lock. It was just to show the concept. And we went to the Consumer Electronics Show in 1997. So yeah, it would have been like late 96 that we did this. And we showed the auto taser. And if you've ever been to CES, it's crazy.
Huge.
This
Huge.
is like all the biggest companies are there. That was the year DVD was launching. And we were the head of the show. We had a crowd, 10 people deep. We were doing this thing called the Auto Taser Challenge. How long could you hold on to it? And it was very entertaining. People would scream expletives. Their friends would laugh. Okay, you try. And we give everybody a hat. And we were on the
How long could you hold on to it?
nobody could hold on for more than a second or two.
Wow.
Now, they're lucky because that also was underpowered. Now that I know how to do these things, we could crank it up where you would not be able to let go. If we really set up, you could be stuck to it as long as I want to keep you there. But I didn't know how to do that back then. And so we have the biggest photo on the front page of the Las Vegas Sun on the opening day of CES. Like we were like this and like DVD was like this. So we thought, this is it. We're going to get rich. The auto taser is the key. And we spent the next 2 years chasing the dream of this auto taser.
And did you think, I know you talked about your friends before, they thought you were doing the shocky gun. They had gone on to do other startups and tech and working with cool tech. But did you think you have made it at that point?
Well, I thought we had a chance. I got confused that all the excitement about the auto taser meant it was going to sell. And I've since learned those two can be two very different things. The auto taser got so much publicity because it was a little bit of a freak product. It, it was cool to demo and people loved the show of it, but people just weren't buying it. And it took us 2 years. I mean, the pain and effort we went through. I had an engineer nearly die on me from exhaustion, had a seizure in the middle of the desert on the way from our Scottsdale office to our
I'm not
production plant
laughing,
in
but-
Mexico. No, I mean, literally, I thought I killed him. And I'm not proud of this,
Right.
but I'll tell you what goes through your mind when somebody collapses on you and you think they're going to die. The first thing that goes through your mind, at least it happened to me, was, oh shit, I killed him. What's going to happen to me? And then you realize, oh, wait a minute. I better worry about this guy. I was afraid I had to just literally worked him to death.
And this is 1997.
That was 98. That was summer.
You're in 98. We're in 1998 now. How many employees do you have at this time?
Maybe
how big is the company?
50, including, we had a production facility in Mexico with, probably most of the people there, 30 down there, maybe 20 in the US. And then we realized, man, the auto taser, this is actually where I learned, if I ever do something for the purpose of making money, it never works out. It's like the universe slaps me. It's like, Rick, like, don't be a shyster and try to make a quick buck. Solve problems that matter and it'll work out. Now, I didn't know that then because now I'm 0 for 2. My first product failed. My second product failed. And I basically went to my dad and said, hey, we should shut this thing down. And part of that was I was up visiting friends of mine from college who were working in Silicon Valley with companies with stupid names like Yahoo and Netscape.
Hey, you have Air Taser.
And I had Air Taser and the Auto Taser, both of which had flamed out very publicly. But my dad explained to me at the time that, it's a little too late, son, because I signed a letter of guarantee. We borrowed $1.5 million from Silicon Valley Bank. He had $500,000 left to his name. And so if we failed, the bank was going to come and take everything. So he put the 500,000 in, basically saying, hey, look, before the bank realizes we're broke, we're going to put it in. You got one more shot. And that's when we pivoted and we said, okay, remember that test apparatus we made with Dr. Stratbucker? Let's pivot.
Asparagus farmer who had a pig, who was a brilliant doctor as well.
Yep. And Strat, every time I saw him, he had dirt under his fingernails. That's why you never judge a book by the cover. And that guy was smarter than just about any other doctor or PhD researcher I've ever met.
In those early days, that's a .com era. Your friends are working, as you just said, cool company up in the valley. Were you attracting outside investors at that time? It was all your father and a few friends.
We tried, man. Oh boy, did we try to raise money. My dad now, as luck would have it, so the money that made Taser possible, he had made when I was 16. My dad was a serial entrepreneur. And almost everything he did failed, except this one that hit in Silicon Valley in 1986. And he made, $6-7 million. It was a lot of money. And that's when I was like, oh, wow. Huh. I mean, I noticed dad was always happier when he was doing a startup than when he was working at a big company. Even though he'd make more money working at big companies, but he was just depressed half the time. And then when a startup works, it's like, oh, this is magic. Dad, he went out and bought a Learjet and a Ferrari. It's kind of like Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
My kind of man.
Yeah, my brother actually had a Ferris Bueller's Day Off with my dad's car and burned out the engine. That's for another day.
Wow.
So let's see. So, and then he did another startup after that, and that one failed. And then he was the CEO of a public company, and then that one failed. And then that was happening while I was building Taser, sucking all of his money dry. And so by 1998, it was dark. Like he was now over 60. He's like, hey, he can't go get another job. And so he came. And one thing I actually really respect, I thought he might come in and be like, all right, get out of the way. The professionals are taking over.
Let me show you how this is done, son.
Yeah. But he didn't. He was like, hey, this is your show. I'm going to come in and I'm going to be your vice president of corporate finance. And I'm going to go raise money for us.
Wow.
And he went and he talked to every venture capital group, including ones he'd made a bunch of money for back in Silicon Valley. And they all thought we were just crazy. Yeah. They were like, no, we're not investing in some electric gun company.
That is mad respect for your father not to come in and just push you out of the way. If he's an entrepreneur as well,
yep.
And not say, all right, you tried it. Let me show you how it's done now.
Yeah, that is
pretty cool.
Pretty awesome.
All right. So you can't raise any money from the outside. It's not the cool internet company like all the others at the time. So where do we go from
Well, we
there?
did have one investor that had come in to visit us, and they said, "You know what? Yeah, we might invest, but on one condition: we got to replace the CEO." And I'd actually told my dad, and Bruce Culver was our other big
Mhm.
investor. I said, "Hey guys, I'm okay with that if we can save the company."
Wow.
And they said, "Nope, you're not getting out of here that easy." They knew I wanted to get up to Silicon Valley and try. I was feeling like such a loser,
Yeah.
um, and thank God they didn't let me go. They said, "No, we're going to stick it out." And what had convinced that one VC was they'd seen a human demo with our first human test pilot of the advanced taser, and they were like, "Wow, that is exciting." And so that gave us sort of the aha moments. Like, what are we doing? We're messing around with this automotive security, like this
Hmm.
shocky club thing. We got to get back to our roots and fix the damn problem and make the taser work. We know how to do it. We've done the animal testing. We've done the human testing. And so my dad took his last 500,000. He pushed it into the company. He got Bruce Culver to match. We had $1 million. It was the last money we would ever raise unless we found success. And over the next year, we hunkered down. We had to lay off 2/3 of the company um, to survive. And a year later, in late 1999, we launched the Advanced Taser M26.
And the M26 is how you found success.
That's right. And we named it the M26 because, funny story, we're like, well, nobody believes the taser works. So we ought to come up with a name that looks and sounds credible. So the military gun is the M16. So let's come up with M something. And we looked at different ways to rate it. Well, it's got 26 watts of power. M26, that's got a nice ring to it.
That
And so that's what we named it.
that's a cool story. But not very sci-fi and not. Did you have other? Do you remember any other names at the time?
I don't. It's been a while. It's been a while. We also went and we showed it to a bunch of cops.
Yeah.
I wanted it to look like a phaser, but we had made 6 or 7 different foam models.
Mhm.
And it was interesting, the psychological reaction when cops saw something that looked like a gun. It just conveyed this sense of credibility. They're like, yeah, I think that one will work.
So you.
And so that's why it ended up looking very much like a Glock,
Mhm.
like a semi-automatic pistol. But of course, we made it in yellow with different coloration. And we launched that in late 99. And then something interesting happened. The internet bubble burst.
Mhm.
And because the internet bubble popped, that's why we were able to go public. Uh, because up until then, nobody had interest in us.
Right.
They're like, oh, this is not the internet. The internet's the thing. And then suddenly everybody's like, oh my God, the internet's imploding. We need deals. And so they looked at us and they said, well, wait a minute. You guys make something physical? You have actual revenue? Like you've got a site to profitability? And so we ended up going public on the NASDAQ in 2001. So this is from one of our days out the NASDAQ.
Look at that.
That was pretty cool. And then the business, boy, did it take off. Between 2001 and 2004, we were almost tripling every year. In fact, I mean, and it was very simple. Just we would
Mhm.
go around to police departments and we would show them the taser and we would bring $100 bill and we'd say, okay, if you think you can beat it, come get $100. And boom, we'd knock them down. And they'd never seen anything like this. And then they'd get right back up. As soon as the taser's off, they're fine. And I mean, we were getting calls from police officers telling us stories about how they saved somebody's life. I remember a poignant one of a Kevin Saylor in Colorado called me up and he said, hey, we had a 13-year-old girl. She was suicidal, locked herself in the bathroom. And when we knocked the door down to go in and try and help her, she came out at them with a knife, with a knife.
Mhm.
And they said, man, 100% we would have shot and killed her, but the M26 was there. And right as the cover officer was starting to squeeze the trigger, the taser fired and stopped her. I mean, I've heard hundreds of stories like that. Unfortunately, those aren't the ones that make the news, but that's what led to the growth. In fact, let me show you this. This is the Wall Street Journal from 2005, where they came out with the stock rankings. But in 2004, we were the #1 stock in the world on both a 1-year returns and a 3-year returns basis. So there's the actual numbers there. Uh, that was
Top guns.
that was pretty wild, but we didn't get to enjoy it for very long because uh, in late 2004, we had this reporter at the New York Times, Alex Berenson, who is on my list of my least favorite people in the universe. Uh, he was coming after us basically claiming the tasers were deadly. He put a picture of Robert Stratbucker. They went out and they filmed him. They took a picture of him sitting on his tractor, and they made him look like a hillbilly, and said, "Oh, their big medical director is an asparagus farmer."
Now I feel bad about making the joke.
Well, no, you shouldn't. Like, it was, there are some very smart people out there, and I think if there's anything we've learned, you shouldn't, just look at somebody's background or how they dress, or the fact he was raised on a farm just meant this guy had a hell of a work ethic.
And as well as I know you, you like most people. That's one reason you don't manage people internally at Axon. You tend to like people, and like, so for somebody to be that high up on your list that you dislike this person.
Well, the thing I would say is Alex Berenson was writing stories about how deadly tasers were, and yet he took a shot from a taser and never told anybody. And I'm like, dude, come on. That's a little hypocritical. If it's so deadly, why would you take a hit with it? And so we ended up writing a letter to the New York Times. We'd also found an article that Alex Berenson was bragging that he played in a regular poker match with a bunch of hedge fund managers. And we're like, hey, this feels like we're really being targeted. In fact, I'm going to have a whole episode dedicated to the 2004, 2005. We had short sellers coming after us, and it was the nastiest thing I've experienced in my life.
So we're going to save that for another episode.
We are going to save that, but
we're not going to talk about corporate espionage.
We had a mole inside the company who was hired in by short sellers to try to help destroy the company, because short sellers make money when the stock goes down. And these are not people who wait for bad things to happen. They're like the next door neighbor that takes out an insurance policy on your house and then teaches your kid to play with matches and some gasoline, and they don't wait for bad things to happen. And in fact, let me pull this up. This was sort of the peak of the hysteria. This was on the cover of USA Today. Taser, right? And they're putting us next to the electric chair. And I'm going to say that I'm going to give them the credit and say this was a mathematical mistake, but it was a big one. They said that the taser was, I think, 1,000 or 1,000,000 times stronger than the electric chair. No, 1,000 times stronger than the electric chair, when in fact, it's 1,000 times weaker. They overstated the power of the taser by 1,000,000 fold on the front page. And of course, we ended up suing Gannett, saying, come on, this is absolutely dangerous slander. And because of this, there were police departments pulling their tasers off the street, right? The public debate had totally spun out of control, what I would characterize as hysteria.
Would you call it the public debate or the media hysteria around it?
I would say media hysteria. It turns out we surveyed the general public, and 70% of the general public, I don't have the stats here, I could bring them back for a later episode, 70% of the public supported the use of taser. So another thing I've learned is, don't believe what you, like, if you read newspaper headlines, that is not indicative of what the public thinks, and neither is Twitter or X.
Right. That's why I'm just thinking, like, this is 2004. That's before sort of hashtag fake news has become so popular to think about, and how we think about the news media today. Like, but then that's the news media carried USA Today, Wall Street Journal, New York Times. They carried a lot more credibility than perhaps they do today.
Well, and I think, look, the newspaper's job is not actually to get to the truth. They will tell you it is, but their real job is to get your eyeballs to look at them. And so they're looking for controversy. And, look, we were making an electrical weapon. This was a huge change in American policing. And look, there were some people who got hurt. There were some people who died after being hit with a taser. Now, the vast majority were drug-related deaths, and I don't say that to judge anybody. Right. My family's been hit by the opioid, the methamphetamine crisis. I'm not saying people deserve it, but I'm saying drugs are extremely dangerous. There's over 100,000 drug-related deaths every year in the U.S., and if you OD on meth, cocaine, PCP, it's not quiet. You become violent and psychotic as you're going through the overstimulation. And the taser was the only thing to this day that police can use that will stop somebody in a psychotic, drug-induced rage, other than a bullet. And of course, we're way safer than a bullet.
Yep. And so you go from this enormous high, you finally hit it, you go public, you hit the IPO, and now you're being attacked left and right in the media. Just like, I think I know the answer to this, but that certainly has affected how you think about, haters today. Whenever you read an article or a newspaper comes after us or comes after the taser device, like that certainly has to affect how you think about these things present day.
It certainly does. It reminds me of, I think it was Teddy Roosevelt's Man in the Arena. Like, sure, the critic can stand on the sidelines and criticize, but we have saved, I know for certain, we have saved thousands and thousands of lives. The statistics say we've averted something like 300,000
Yep.
potential deadly force incidents. Not saying that all of those people would have been shot, but that's a good estimate on the number, because about 5% of taser uses, a gun could have been used.
Right.
But look, in the other, and people say, well, what about the other 95%? Taser has a lower injury rate than playing collegiate volleyball. You are more likely to get injured in volleyball practice than being hit by a taser by police in the street. And that's so incredulous, I have to stop saying it, because people paint me as being cavalier and insensitive. But that is a statistical truth. In
Right.
fact, the taser's safety record is so good, it is unbelievable, meaning the critics just will not believe the science.
Yeah. Well, volleyball injuries don't make news or sell newspaper or get clicks in today's world. So you're getting hit left and right. It's 2004. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, let me pull back up here to this. God, this is so fun editing. our own podcast.
I think you're having a lot more fun editing and playing with your, what is that called? Ecamm Live
Yeah,
than you are having the conversation with me.
yeah. Well, no, I'm actually enjoying the conversation too. This is just fun that we can make it all work. So look at this. So this is the emotional roller coaster between when we went public in 2001, and then you can see just things exploded in 2003 into 2004. And this is, as measured in the stock price. Now, you'll see there's a lot of volatility in there.
Yep.
And hold on one second. I am going to bring up. So here's when that first New York Times piece hit. So we were really rolling. That was July 18th, 2004. And I remember it because my anniversary is July 19th. And we were in such a panic, I forgot my anniversary.
Oof.
Yeah.
I
I
bet-
remember crawling into bed that night, and my wife rolls over and says, "Happy anniversary, honey."
Ouch.
And I was like, and actually,
I bet she still remembers that to this day.
she is such a fantastic human being. It was not with a hint of, anger or
Oh.
disappointment. She knew
Yeah.
what we were going through. She was really worried about me. Now let me come over here, and I'm gonna move you out of the way so we can bring up, and look at this. This was at the end of about a 6-month run there. I believe the New York Times stories were so negative it triggered an SEC investigation, and that's when life got really ugly, because our customers, our police, they understood. They're like, "Hey, you're getting negative headlines. Pff, welcome to policing." I can relate, bro. I mean, it's kind of, they look at it. But wait a minute, you're under a federal investigation? Oh, I remember we had big orders that were in flight, and our customers were saying, "Hey man, sorry, we can't buy from you until this is done, because I can't go to my city council and they're going to beat me up with this, that you're on the front page of the newspaper, that, you guys are under a federal investigation." So we had to, basically what we ended up doing, this is where I learned the value of transparency. I called up our lawyers and I said, "I want to go meet the SEC." And they said, "Wait, you want to do what?" I said, "I want to go meet the investigators. I want to help them do their job." And they said, "That's crazy. Nobody gives voluntary testimony. Every question you have to vet your answers, et cetera." And I said, "That's great. You're used to defending guilty people.
Yeah.
Like,
Nothing to
I'm
hide.
happy to sit in front of them." And I said, "Look, we will not survive if we don't get this cleared up. I need to help the SEC get their job done." And so the lawyers relented. And so we walked into the offices of the SEC in San Francisco with boxes of documents. And we sat there, and for hours we said, "Okay, you want to know about, basically my pitch was very simple. The allegation they were investigating is we lied about the safety of taser devices in order to pump up the stock price." I said, "Look, me, my brother, our CFO, all the senior execs had all been hit with a taser. You can call us stupid, but you can't call us liars.
Right.
You might disagree with us, but I'm going to show you all the data. Oh, here's the allegation that cocaine and a taser together make it more dangerous." We actually sponsored studies at the Cleveland Clinic where they took anesthetized pigs and they gave them cocaine and then tested electrical safety thresholds and found zero indication that there was more likely that you would get fibrillated by electricity. And we had many, many studies like that. And when we walked out of the office, our lawyers were high-fiving us. They're like, "Man, that just cut like years off the investigation.
Or were they surprised you like, hey, we're coming in? Like they probably don't get that a lot.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the first time I'd ever done it, so I didn't know what to expect.
Yeah.
But look, I work with law enforcement. So when I came in, I'm like, hey, I get it. You got a job to do. I don't take any offense. Like they were writing so many egregious things about me in the New York Times. I get it. You got to investigate. I want to help you get it done.
Now I've known much of the story because we're around each other quite a bit, but like the way you sort of described it today makes so much sense of how much of sort of that your ethos is embedded in the company's DNA today. Like whether it's stock price volatility, you always tell everybody, don't worry, like don't pay attention to it. It goes up, it goes down, or whether it's dealing with negative news articles that come out. And as we're recording this podcast, there was another hit piece that came out on John Oliver's show. Like is sort of block out that noise and keep on doing what we're doing because we're doing the right thing. You knew, as we know today, that a TASER device can save lives.
100%. Here's another thing I have to stop saying because it sounds cavalier. We have a higher safety margin than Tylenol. If you take 8 times the recommended maximum dose of Tylenol, it can cause fatal liver failure. With the TASER, we've tested this. We've got to increase like 16 times the dose before we cause a fatal cardiac arrhythmia. Now, again, I've stopped saying that because, people would say that we're underplaying the risk of the TASER. So, okay, we get it. It's a serious weapon. The real risks, the big risks, are injuries from falls. That is the number one risk. But
or they fall backwards and they hit their head.
Yeah, something like that, or they fall off a high place. And look, it's still a tragedy. I mean, people have lost their lives like that. But I would say, like, the Potomac Policy Institute was hired by a competitor to do a study of us, and so the incentive was for them to prove we're not safe.
Correct.
And they came out. And by the way, the Potomac Policy Institute, boy, what a great group, above reproach.
Mm-hmm.
Like they were going to do the study and see where it landed. They concluded we have a higher safety, lives saved ratio to lives lost than airbags in automobiles. Because look, automobiles save a lot of lives. Occasionally they kill somebody.
Right.
Same thing with the TASER. Occasionally there's a fatal outcome caused by the TASER, again, usually from a fall or sometimes flammable liquids and fluids that can ignite. But the number of lives we save is far in excess, so that our ratio is better than airbags. And yet many people still, when they think about TASER, they think about the negative headlines.
It's amazing. I'd love to have been in the room when they present their findings to the competitor. I'm like, actually, you're wrong.
Oh, that would have been, I wish I could have been there too. So I want to come back to this. So this chart here shows, boy, this is so fun.
I don't know which, I'm trying to decide which monitor to look at.
This is our all that volatility.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, it was quite a hangover. Once that, we didn't recover for years after this. And the other thing that happened once the SEC story hit, we were flooded with lawsuits. I mean, the number of lawsuits against us was just off the chart. I think we had over 100 shareholder lawsuits. Ultimately, we had around 400 product liability suits come against us. And the thing is, we just dug in and we fought them all. We're like, you know what? If we start settling these, our business will go under. So we have to fight. The science is on our side. And one of the things that came out from all this pain, this is a great example. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's the body camera. The reason we made body cameras is not because we're like, oh, hey, maybe we can make some money selling body cameras. This was to defend our customers and ourselves from all the horrible allegations. Without this, people would say that cops had tasered them, tortured them, had done terrible things. People were alleging that the TASER had killed people. And we're like, look, let's just record what's happening. Now, this was another example of, for the first 7 years, this was a miserable business because cops did not want to wear body cameras. We knew the only way to do this was to put the data in the cloud. We knew enough from selling to local government. Most city police departments back in 2010 did not have one full-time IT person because your average police department has like 40 people. Right? The IT is over in some other department in the city. And so for them, if we sold them body cameras and they had to burn things on disks, like it would never work. And so we just simply copied the Apple iTunes model, right? The last thing the world needed was another music player in the late 1990s, but Apple identified, you had to solve the whole problem. The software to get your music on, the software to organize your playlists, and then ultimately moving the whole music store to the cloud. And now you can't buy CDs anymore. We did the same thing in reverse. Say, hey, we're going to make these cameras. You got to put the data somewhere. And we partnered with Microsoft to build what is now, I think, the largest video repository in the world. We believe we're bigger than YouTube in terms of the amount of video that we store. Now they have a lot more viewers, but we have now 1 million cops wearing body cameras. And because we did this, we now have this huge software business where we run the digital evidence backbone for the country of Scotland, for the U.S. attorneys federally in the United States, for the vast majority of police departments. And that's why we're now not just a weapon company, but a true tech company. We're one of the world leaders in artificial intelligence because we're able to use AI partnered with our body cameras to now turn that into not just a recording device, but an AI partner on your chest.
I don't think there are a lot of people understand the origin story of body cameras. You just think it came on the scene and it just became a big thing after Ferguson for sure. But I don't think they understand until you just told the story of how body cameras actually came to be. And it was to defend police who you believe were doing the right things, or to tell the real story that would happen when they had to deploy a taser.
Well, yeah, before this, people just believe what they want to believe. Like, look, I believe in the goodness of police. I work with them every day. It's an honorable profession. So look, yeah, I'm biased. If I hear a story, I naturally bias stories. I bet some dirtbag is lying about the police because the police are honorable. And look, sometimes I'm wrong. There have been some bad cops out there for sure. There's a lot of other people that have the opposite view. I never believe the police. But that's not productive for us to just yell at each other about our biases. And that really came to a head in Ferguson, Missouri.
Yep. But before you get to, but do you want to tell the story though? That I think you were sitting in with 2 officers defending a court case in California.
Yep. I was in Salinas County, Northern California, and we were co-defending a case. We were being sued by the family of a deceased man, Robert Heston Jr. He was, I believe, around 40 years old and he'd had a pretty troubled life. He had a more than a decade-long struggle with methamphetamines and various drugs. And on the night the police were called, he was in a rage. If I remember correctly, he was dragging his father around the front yard. His father, who was wheelchair bound, had been drug out of his wheelchair. And throughout the trial, as happens, they were showing poignant moments like his high school graduation photo, et cetera, to humanize Mr. Heston. And I remember the officers, and by the way, when the family got up there, they would say really colorful things about these jackbooted thugs. These officers did all these terrible things. And yet when the officers testify, they've got to be very precise and respectful, and everything was Mr. Heston this, Mr. Heston that. But offline, what the officer would tell me, this one cop looked at me and said, Rick, I've been a cop for 26 years. The only time in my entire career I was scared. I was never scared before that night. But when I saw this guy, it was not the smiling person from the high school graduation photo. What I saw was an enraged human being that looked like something out of the Exorcist movie. And I remember him telling me, I felt like if he could knock me to the ground, he would eat my face. And that's a pretty graphic description. And I remember as he was describing that to me, I thought, we've got to show the world what you see. Like this jury, they've got to just choose who to believe, because what you're telling them is very different from what the family is telling them. And so it was in that moment I said, we are going to build body cameras, and we are going to allow you to show the world the human being you met in the condition you met them and the challenges you dealt with, not their bright history.
So that court case was instrumental in your idea to start the body camera business, which is now body cameras, over 1 million police officers around the world, at least.
Well, and to put it in perspective, so let me go back to that stock chart for a second. If I come back here, you'll see, let me take myself off of here.
I mean, I was going to say, I thought you were just taking me off of there.
That peaked up around $35. Like we're currently over $500. And look, stock price is far from everything. Like it's not, in fact, it's not even the thing that matters most. What matters most is the value of the problems we're solving, but the stock price is reflective of that. Yeah. And so we're 20, 30 times bigger now than we were at our peak back then. And that's because we have developed this full ecosystem. You know, we're doing drones and robotics. We have an AI report writing tool. Within the next few weeks, our body cameras will speak 110 languages and be able to translate to any major language on earth for a police officer. Think about how valuable that will be when you meet somebody. You have no idea what language they're even trying to speak to you. Your body camera will say, "Hey, that's Turkish," and then bloop, it'll start translating.
Are you going to take us back to the Czech Republic?
I went back to the Czech Republic, and oh, what a return it was. In fact, in one of our episodes, I will show you my MacArthur-esque video of my return with the M26 Taser to the Czech Republic.
Mark, I'm very surprised he doesn't have that video ready to pull up. He usually has that video.
I do, but you know, I wanted today to be the story arc in general. How we spent a lot of time on the early days, but we're going to go back in detail on all this. But one of the takeaways is what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. If you just do the right thing, like things work out in the end. You know, we've been called a lot of things, and the main thing is like, look, if we're transparent, we're not perfect, but if you've got a problem, don't hide it. If you've got a challenge, like get it out there quickly. And it's surprising. Like our customers have really stuck with us. They're like, hey, you know what? There's one thing we know we can do. We can trust you. That, you know, sometimes we have issues rolling your system out. I mean, you and I were on a problematic customer call this morning.
We were.
And the thing that felt good was like, hey man, you let us down. Some of your products were buggy and we were disappointed, but we know you guys will make it right and stick with us. And that's, you know, that's so important.
It is those moments, and maybe we'll end on you telling the relationship thing again. I mean, like that is very powerful, and it is certainly something that we all think about. I thought you were going to quiz me though earlier on the stock price, and which I would have gotten wrong, because I've learned over the years, just like we've been talking about, like I don't pay attention to it, because if we're doing the right things and we're doing the right things by our customers, stock price is going to go up, it's going to go down, we'll ultimately make money. But we're not in this business to simply make money. That's a nice byproduct. We're here to solve problems and help police do the right things in society and help solve problems.
Yeah, we are blessed to have this amazing mission, right? When people ask how we get such dedicated employees, part of it is we're able to attract really talented people, because really talented people want to do work they're going to be proud of, right? They don't want to sell some schlocky thing, even if they can make money doing it. I mean, yeah, some people will, but really talented people have a choice. And we say, hey, come with us. We're going to make the bullet obsolete. We're going to make policing transparent. We are ultimately going to use technology to suppress violence, to make the world safer, and do it in a way that builds the kind of transparent, open society we want to live in. We don't have to be a repressive authoritarian regime with massive surveillance everywhere, but we can unlock these cameras to identify when people need help, when somebody's being violently attacked, or when there's a person who is known to be dangerous. I think we can all agree, boy, it'd be great if all these cameras that are everywhere could light up in a way that builds a safe world for us and our kids. Because, you know, crime in America is probably the number one thing that degrades our quality of life, because there's whole neighborhoods here where people don't feel safe that they can go out. And when you can't even go outside safely, you know, it's hard to focus on, you know, the higher order things if your fundamental personal security isn't even safe.
Right. And when you say that you'll make the bullet obsolete, some people may hear something different. Like, what do you mean when you say you want to make the bullet obsolete?
Yeah. We are in no way saying, like, we stay out of the whole gun control debate, but, you know, I brought a little prop here. This is an original blunderbuss.
You just happen to have this here in the volcano's lair.
This particular weapon is about 500 years old. Or this design, maybe 400. This is what, you know, they were using I think the British to fight off pirates on their ships. But actual firearm technology goes back almost 1,000 years. And if you think about it, the early firearms would sometimes explode and kill the operator. And so firearms weren't always that reliable. In fact, early on, I bet the archers of the day would hold their bow and arrow, go, well, I'm not using that thing. That'll never be effective and reliable, the thing that can explode and kill somebody. But, you know, over centuries, we have refined to where now firearms are highly reliable. But the thing is, when people use lethal force, they never use it because it's lethal. They use it because it's reliable. And especially police. Like, you might have a serial killer.
Right.
There's nothing I can do about that. But the guy who killed my two friends was a businessman who had a gun in the glove box of his car.
Hold on.
So let me get this so I don't. There we go.
The volcano's there needs a. Wait, what do you call that gun again?
A blunderbuss.
It needs a blunderbuss holder here in the volcano's lair.
The guy who killed my two friends was a businessman who had a gun in the glove box of his car. And look, by the way, Corey and Todd, we were not super close friends. I knew them through my high school football team. And in fact, there's been some controversy about whether I've overstated that. So I want to be very clear. It wasn't that it was a deeply personal relationship. It was just the fact that in Scottsdale, Arizona, people that ran in the same social circles as me, who were at the same Burger King on Friday nights, meeting up with other kids, those people, my peers, are getting gunned down. And so, like, no place in America is totally safe. But the guy who killed him, no previous criminal record. I don't think he went out to kill anybody that day. He found himself in a situation that spun out of control. And the gun was what he had to defend himself. Now he's spending his life in prison and they're dead. So the challenge we have with non-lethal weapons is they just haven't been reliable enough. But if we had Captain Kirk's phaser, right, and it was longer range, 100% reliable, then there really would be no reason that you would ever need to blow a hole in somebody with a bullet, which is actually Hollywood overplays it sometimes. Bullets, when you talk to people who've actually been in gunfights, it's a gruesome affair. And a lot of times people can take a lot of shots before they go down. And so ultimately our goal is like, look, we're going to earn our way up to where we're going to give you a non-lethal capability that'll be a faster time to incapacitation, more reliable than a 9mm. Now it's a high bar, but we're getting close. Yeah. I think we're within 2 years that we will be literally outperforming a 9mm in immediate stopping power.
Yeah, and that gets, the reason you started the company, your fundamental belief back in 93 was still your fundamental belief today that technology, killing is a technology problem. And we could solve and prevent killing and protect life by better technology.
100%. But it's a combination of the technology, the policy, the training. We also have to change the culture. You were with me, I believe, in Oslo, Norway, with Espen. Met an amazing trainer.
I'm sure we're going to have him on the podcast.
For sure we will. He is going to change the world. So he's a guy, the Norwegian police are not generally armed yet. And he was going out and he was on a mission to convince the government to arm every Norwegian police officer with a gun. And then he started testing our new TASER 10. And he actually came to the conclusion that we have one last hurdle, and that is once we solve the heavy clothing problem, that indeed the TASER 10 would be a better choice for most police officers than a gun. And when we went to see him train, when he said that, hey, the TASER is actually a better choice than a gun, I was like, whoa, dude, hold on. Like, you can't say that. Like, that's crazy talk.
Yeah.
Like, but a day later, 2 days later, he did a 2-day class. And he actually had police officers suit up in padding and fight. And what he showed is like, look, if you're in a fight and you pull your gun out, you're now fighting over your gun. Like, you've taken what's a non-lethal situation and turned it into a life-threatening situation for everybody involved. And as he went through it, these officers, through their own experience, came to believe, wow, we're very close. So we're going to be testing with Espen and his Nordic comrades over the next year. We're going to be testing our new heavy clothing penetrating projectile. We haven't even named it yet. And then we're going to bring that back and they're going to test it in the coldest places on Earth, up north of the Arctic Circle. And I think we're going to prove that we, in fact, are very close to making the bold obsolete.
That's going to be a cool episode to have a real life Viking on the podcast. So Espen is a Viking. So.
He is. And what I love is because it's a combination of the Nordic countries are seen as the most civilized in the world now, right? They bring the Nobel Peace Prize comes from the Nordics. But look, if we're going to win the hearts and minds of cops, the frontline officers, like, we're going to have to convince them that, like, if you are a true combative expert, that this is going to work for you, that this isn't just some politically correct thing that politicians are foisting on top of you.
Now, and I know we're going to start wrapping up here, our very first podcast, but to think about from the early days, but the M26 being the first taser that really worked and the company takes off to, I don't know what version would you include we're on TASER 10 right now. They're not sequentially ordered.
Yeah, it was supposed to be sequentially ordered. TASER 7 was the 7th major taser. TASER 10 was going to be the 8th, but it had 10 shots. And it was such a leap in capability, we decided to skip from 7 to 10.
Makes for a better story. Like, just sort of talk about that as we start to wrap here, about just thinking back and looking at the evolution from those early days of Jack Cover in Tucson, to finally hitting it big, to this version that we're on now, and also knowing where we're going to go, as you're just talking about, when a dart that can penetrate heavy clothing. I know in the future we'll talk about drones and robots and things like that, but just sort of reflect on that transition and that evolution of the taser.
Well, look, if we take a step back, we have a problem with gun violence. Now, you can't blame the gun. You got to blame the people. I get that. But there's a lot of people getting shot and killed, particularly in the United States. And look, it's escalating in other parts of the world as well. And how do we stop a person with a gun? Today.
Send in somebody else with a gun.
Yeah. And we have a gunfight. This is like the Wild West. We have not progressed. You stop a gun with a gunfight. Now, imagine it's your kid's school and some sick person shows up with a gun. And now the police show up and they stop the guy. And thank goodness that they will do that job. But now you got more bullets flying. I mean, people have been killed regularly because it's hard. You can't control where all those bullets go. I think the long-term solution, number one, we're going to build a taser that's a better close quarter weapon than a handgun. And then we're going to build drones and robots so that you don't have to send a person in. You send in a drone or a robot very quickly. And I actually think that'll change the game, because look, when gun violence happens, it's because people get fascinated by violence. Movies are about gun violence, books, films, television series, right? Like right now, violence is unfortunately kind of the quintessential human competition. It's life and death. But that's kind of sick. Like, we live in a world, we should be past that. And so whether it's somebody played too many video games, watched too many movies, just went down some rat hole, when you get some mass shooter, they know they're not coming out alive. They want to go down in what they perceive to be a blaze of glory, where they're in a gunfight with the police, with the, standing up to the government or whoever they think it is they're standing up to. I want to change the game where it's like, no, you don't get a gunfight. You show up with a gun, we're deploying a small robotic system, and you're going to be down. There's no drama. Nobody's going to make a movie about it. You're not going to be on the news. We're not going to read your manifesto. It's going to be a little bit humiliating, and you're going to end up in orange pajamas, and that's the end of your story. Done. And I think that happens enough. Like, people are going to be like, oh, yeah, there's no glory in this. I'm not going to do it.
Well, I think we did it. I think we cut our first podcast.
Well, we're close. I actually have one more surprise for you, Mike.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So
can I get the right answer to this one, please?
Yeah. And I think it's an interesting pivot, because we talk a lot about technology, but much more important than technology is our relationships. And I know people are like, what? This crazy guy talking about, the taser guy talking about relationships. But look back at the moments in your life you cherish most. I guarantee. Like, think back right now. What is the most valuable moment you can think of?
Yeah, birth of my kids, as one example.
Yeah, give me another
Getting
one.
married.
Yeah.
Second example.
Yeah, for me, like meeting my wife. The moment Kool-Aid became my new aide. Guy works for me at work. We're having a lot of fun.
That's not his name, and we might have an HR violation. But okay, go ahead.
I found like 10 different ways to pronounce Kalu. And he's my aide. And
okay,
so
Kalu is Kalu's standing right over here. Kalu is from South Africa. He's one of what we call, he's in our leadership development program. So fresh out of college and full of energy. And
he's asking me these great questions. Hey, Rick, why do we do things this way? And I'll look at him and I'll go, because that's the way we've always done it. Maybe we should change. Anyway, look, coming back to my point, Like, think about all the time we've spent together,
Yeah.
right?
I remember the day we met.
I
I
dri-
remember the first day I met you.
Look, I drive an expensive car. There's days I'm driving down the street in my Lamborghini and I look over and somebody's looking at me and they're like, and I'm like, oh, wow. What? Oh, hey, that's right. Like, I'm driving this awesome car that I grew up fantasizing about. Like, you get used to the stuff, and the stuff doesn't matter. What matters are the people around us and the relationships that we've got. And I believe that, and it's not just true in our personal life. At work, like, the reason Axon works is not because we have some killer procedure manual. It's because we've developed a culture where we build strong relationships, trusting relationships. Now, it means we don't put up with any BS either. Like, look, if you're kind of a toxic person, you're just not going to last long, because like, if you can't build good, trusting relationships, we are not the place for you. And I think that's also true of our customers. Like, when I talk to police, like a SWAT team or others, far more important than what their procedures and processes are, it's the trust they build in each other. And I want to end with this idea that for us, even more valuable than the hundreds of patents we've got or the TASER technology or the body camera, the most important thing we have is our relationships with our customers. Because if we ruin that, they will find somebody else to go make their tech. And so we enforce this with our employees, right? When you come out, it's like, hey, we spent 30 years building these relationships, and you can build trust over 30 years and lose it in a day. And so I think, and relationships take work too. Like, whether it's in our personal lives, you think about marriage takes work, your relationship with your kids, you got to invest, and a relationship with our customers as well, something that we have to be very diligent about protecting and cherishing.
I like that. It's a good way to end it, but I know from being around you a lot, is there anything else you have, Rick?
Well, I went back to, I think this was from 2017 or 2018. We brought in the band One Republic. You remember that?
I do remember it.
And I want to end by thanking our customers for being in a relationship with us. And we're not going to let you down. And so here we go. The end of the first Bold to Go podcast. And by the way, as you watch, I watched this video earlier. There's nobody who goes more boldly than our customers. Right?
Is this it? You're going to play this? And
this is it. These guys strap on body armor. They don't know if they're coming home safe. And they go out and they do amazing work. And they can look back at the end of their career and say, you know what? I lived.
We have a special tribute tonight to law enforcement. Thank you for all that you do on a daily basis. Hope when you take that jump, you don't fear the fall. Hope when the water rises, you build a wall. I hope when the crowd screams out, they're screaming your name. And I hope if everybody runs, you choose to stay. I hope that you fall in love and hurt so bad. Yeah. The only way you can know, you give it all you had. And I hope that you don't suffer but take the pain. I hope when your moment comes that you'll say, I did it all. I did it all. I owned every second that this world could give. Saw so many places, the things that I did. Yeah, with every broken bone, I swear I lived. I hope that you spend your days and they all add up. When that sun goes down, you raise your cup, yeah. Wish that I could witness all your joy and all your pain. Until my moment comes, I'll say,
What a privilege and an honor to be part of this community. Hey, Mike?
That's pretty awesome.
All right, guys. Thanks. I hope you enjoyed our first episode. We have so many more stories to tell you and so many more stories we're going to live together as we make the bold obsolete. Let's go. Let's
Thank you.
boldly go.
Let's boldly go.